Russia's war does not run on tanks, missiles, or soldiers. It runs on oil. Every shell fired in Ukraine, every drone launched, every soldier paid at the front traces back to one thing flowing beneath Russian soil: oil revenue. Taxes from crude sales have quietly kept Putin's invasion alive long after the world expected it to choke. And for a long time, that fuel line stayed open. Until now. Because without firing a single shot, without launching a missile, the United States just moved to cut off the one thing Russia cannot fight without. And what's happening next is already shaking the foundations of Moscow's war machine. Before we go any further, understand this. What you're about to hear is not theory, it's not speculation, and it's not hype. These moves are already unfolding in real time, and the consequences will reshape the war in ways most people aren't ready for. So if you want clear, calm breakdowns of the power moves actually deciding global conflicts, not the noise, not the headlines, but the pressure points, this is exactly where you should be. Subscribe now, because the next few months are going to rewrite the global order, and you'll want to understand what's happening before everyone else does. For years, Russia survived sanctions by leaning on oil. When banks closed, oil paid the bills. When technology imports dried up, oil kept the state running. When casualties mounted and equipment vanished, oil revenue filled the gaps. It wasn't enough to make Russia strong, but it was enough to keep it alive. The unspoken question hanging over the war was never if sanctions would hurt Russia, but how long oil could keep Putin afloat. That answer just arrived. At the end of October, Washington made a decision that looked quiet on the surface, but landed like a seismic charge underground. New U.S. sanctions targeted two pillars of Russia's oil empire, Lukoil and Rosneft. This wasn't symbolic pressure. This wasn't diplomatic theater. It was a direct hit on the arteries, feeding Russia's war budget. The message was simple. If peace talks keep failing, the fuel line gets shut tighter. Much tighter. At first, the shock rippled outward slowly. Then panic set in. Lukoil, Russia's largest privately owned oil company, took the hit hard and fast. Within days, executives realized this was a sanction they could wait out. Markets reacted. Investors fled. Assets that once printed money suddenly became liabilities. And behind closed doors, a brutal reality settled in. If relief didn't come, Lukoil would have to start selling off pieces of its global empire just to survive. That's when the fire sale began. By October 27th, bids were already coming in. Not because Lukoil wanted to sell, but because it had no choice. As allies followed Washington's lead and restrictions tightened, overseas holdings turned toxic overnight. Lukoil's crown jewels, assets that once funneled foreign cash back into Russia, were suddenly bleeding money instead of generating it. In Iraq, Lukoil held a massive stake in the West Kurna II oil field, one of the largest on Earth, pumping nearly 500,000 barrels a day. In Bulgaria, the Neftin Burgas refinery, critical infrastructure, stood on the chopping block. Refineries in Romania, fuel networks across Europe, gas stations scattered across the United States. These weren't side projects. These were the veins carrying money from outside Russia's strait into Putin's tax system. And one by one, they started slipping from Moscow's grip. Fast forward to now, and the scale of the damage is impossible to ignore. The assets are being sold. The buyers aren't friendly states. They aren't neutral middlemen. According to reporting, a U.S. investment firm is taking control in a deal estimated around $22 billion. Read that again carefully. Russian oil assets, once sustaining the invasion of Ukraine, are being transferred into American hands. This isn't just embarrassing. It's devastating. Because every barrel sold by Lukoil used to mean tax revenue flowing back to the Kremlin. Revenue that paid soldiers. Revenue that funded factories. Revenue that kept the war alive. Now that money doesn't cross Russia's borders at all. It can't be taxed. It can't be redirected. It can't be weaponized. A lifeline that once stretched across continents has been cleanly severed. And while that cash injection may keep Lukoil breathing a little longer, it doesn't save Russia. In fact, it exposes a deeper problem. Lukoil is private, which once made it flexible and globally powerful, but now leaves it brutally exposed. Rosneft, state-owned, can be propped up by the Kremlin, Lukoil can't. Its global footprint, once Russia's quiet advantage, has turned into a vulnerability that sanctions are ripping apart piece by piece. What made this worse, much worse, is what Lukoil now has to do to keep selling oil at all. Deep discounts, fire sale pricing, desperation deals with buyers who know Russia has no leverage left. Every discounted barrel shrinks tax revenue even further. Every lost asset tightens the chokehold. And every week that passes, Russia's oil empire looks less like a foundation and more like a collapsing scaffold. But this is only the opening phase, because what's happening to Lukoil is about to spread far beyond one company. The pressure is building across Russia's entire energy sector. State revenue is wobbling. Budget forecasts are breaking. And the real consequences, the ones that don't show up on balance sheets, haven't even arrived yet. That's where this story turns dangerous. Because when oil stops paying for war, something else always pays instead. And what Russia may be forced to sacrifice next could change the trajectory of the conflict entirely. Stay with me, because what comes next is a part Moscow hoped the world would never notice. The problem for Moscow is that once oil revenue starts shrinking, it doesn't decline gently. It falls off a cliff. Russia built its entire wartime economy on the assumption that energy money would always be there to absorb shocks. Sanctions? Oil would cover it. Losses at the front? Oil would cover it. Currency pressure? Oil would cover it. But now that safety net is tearing, and the weight of the war is crashing down on everything underneath it at once. What makes this moment especially dangerous for Russia is timing. The war has dragged on far longer than the Kremlin planned. Equipment losses are accelerating, manpower costs are rising, and the state is already burning through reserves just to maintain basic stability. Oil was the last pillar holding all of that together. When that pillar weakens, the strain spreads instantly across the entire system. Inside Russia, the effects are already showing. Tax income from energy exports is slipping at the exact moment military spending is surging. The government can't cut defense without admitting failure, and it can't raise civilian taxes without risking unrest. That leaves only one option: drain the future to pay for present. Pension funds, regional budgets, infrastructure projects, social programs. Everything not directly tied to the war becomes expendable. And here's where the situation turns truly toxic for Kremlin. Oil isn't just money, it's leverage. For years, Russia used energy exports to pressure neighbors, influence markets, and buy political silence. Discounted oil deals kept partner cooperative. Energy dependency softened criticism. That leverage is evaporating. When assets are sold, contracts are broken, and discounts deepen, Russia stops being a power broker and starts looking like a distressed seller begging for buyers. Even worse, the sanctions don't need to completely stop Russian oil exports to be effective. They only need to make them inefficient. Slower shipments, higher insurance costs, limited access to technology, fewer buyers willing to risk secondary sanctions. Every friction point eats into profit margins, and Russia doesn't have margins to spare anymore. The war is too expensive, the economy is too brittle, and the political cost of failure is too high. Meanwhile, Rosneft, the state-owned giant, may look more stable on paper, but it's carrying a different kind of risk. Shielded by the Kremlin, yes, but also fully tied to it. Any losses at Rosneft become losses for the state itself. Any shortfall must be covered directly from the federal budget. That means oil companies and the government are no longer separate shock absorbers. They are collapsing together. And this is where the ripple effects start to hit the battlefield. Modern war burns money at an astonishing rate. Precision weapons, drones, replacement vehicles, ammunition stockpiles. All of it depends on consistent funding. When cash flow tightens, corners get cut, maintenance is delayed, training is reduced, equipment is pushed past safe limits. Soldiers feel it first, long before analysts see it in reports. Fewer spare parts, lower quality gear, delayed pay, reduced rotation cycles. Morale erodes quietly, then all at once. At the same time, Russia's ability to replenish its oil infrastructure is being strangled. Advanced drilling equipment, refinery components, software systems, spare parts, Much of it depended on Western technology or global supply chains now closed off. Wells don't last forever. Refineries degrade. Pipelines require constant maintenance. Without access to replacement technology, output doesn't just stall, it declines permanently. This means Russia isn't just losing money today. It's losing future capacity. Every asset sold, every field neglected, every refinery starved of parts is a wound that doesn't heal quickly. Even if sanctions were lifted tomorrow, the damage compounds year after year. And then there's the international angle, perhaps the most humiliating part for Moscow. Oil assets that once funded Russia's geopolitical ambitions are now strengthening foreign balance sheets. Revenue that once flowed into the Kremlin is being redirected elsewhere. Russia isn't just weaker, it's financing the very systems working against it. The Kremlin understands this. That's why official messaging has shifted. Gone are the bold economic forecasts. Gone are the confident reassurances. In their place are vague statements, deflections, and silence. When governments stop talking numbers, it's usually because the numbers are bad, but the most dangerous consequence hasn't hit yet. Because when economic pressure reaches a certain threshold, leaders stop thinking in terms of sustainability and start thinking in terms of survival. And survival decisions are rarely cautious, rational, or restrained. They are fast, risky, and often irreversible. Russia is approaching that threshold now. The oil lifeline that kept the war alive is fraying. The budget math is breaking. The margin for error is gone. And the next move Moscow makes won't be about winning. It will be about avoiding collapse. And that's when the world needs to pay very close attention. When a system built on pressure finally starts to crack, it doesn't fail quietly. It fails violently, unpredictably, and all at once. Russia is entering that phase now. The kind where every lever pulled makes something else snap. Because oil wasn't just revenue. It was time. Time to rotate troops. Time to rebuild units. Time to replace destroyed equipment. Time to convince the population that sacrifice would eventually lead to victory. Without oil money flowing freely, time itself becomes Russia's enemy. Look at the Kremlin's dilemma. If it cuts military spending, the front lines weaken immediately. Ukraine presses harder. Losses accelerate. The illusion of control shatters. But if it keeps spending at current levels while revenue collapses, inflation surges, reserves drain, and civilian life deteriorates, either path leads to instability. There is no safe option left. And history is brutally clear about what happens to regimes when war drains the economy faster than propaganda can patch the cracks. Soldiers come home angry. Families start asking where the money went. Regional leaders demand support Moscow can no longer provide. Elites begin protecting themselves instead of the system. Loyalty quietly turns conditional. Behind closed doors, the fear isn't defeat on the battlefield. It's what defeat unleashes at home. The most dangerous phase of any authoritarian war is the moment leaders realize they can't win cleanly, but also can't afford to lose. That's when escalation becomes tempting. That's when red lines blur. That's when desperate gambles replace long-term planning. And oil sanctions have accelerated Russia toward that moment far faster than tanks or missiles ever could. Think about the symbolism alone. The very resource Russia used to project power across Europe is now the tool strangling its war effort. The pipelines that once gave Moscow leverage are becoming liabilities. The energy empire that funded invasion is now bleeding itself dry just to stay afloat. Every discounted barrel sold is a reminder that Russia is no longer dictating terms. It's reacting. Every asset sold off is a confession that the war cannot sustain itself as promised. Every emergency budget adjustment is another signal that the foundation is cracking. Meanwhile, Ukraine doesn't need to win tomorrow. It just needs to endure. Because time now favors a side whose economy isn't collapsing under the weight of its own aggression. And the U.S. understands this perfectly. This wasn't about a single sanction. It was about severing the artery. About forcing Russia to fight a modern war with an economy sliding backward. About making every month of continued fighting more painful than the last. And here's the part that should make you uneasy. When leaders lose the ability to finance war normally, they don't always stop the war. Sometimes they change its shape. They take bigger risks. They search for shortcuts. They look for shocks that might reset the board in their favor. That's where this story is heading. Because the end game isn't just about oil prices or asset sales. It's about what Moscow does when the money finally isn't there. When the reserves are thin, when the illusion of endless endurance collapses. Does Russia pull back, or does it lash out? That question is no longer theoretical. It's approaching fast. And the next moves won't be announced in press releases. They'll be felt in sudden escalations, unexpected decisions, and moments that change the trajectory of the war overnight. This is a turning point most people aren't watching closely enough. And what comes next could shock the world. If you want to stay ahead of it, if you want to understand the moves before they happen, not after, make sure you're subscribed right now. Because the next chapter of this story isn't about economics anymore. It's about survival, desperation, and choices that can't be undone. And trust me, what's coming next is far bigger than oil.